a number of amazing academics around the world, one of which is Dr. Koenraad Elst, who I'm very happy to say is hosting here for a few days, and he's giving a number of talks. Yesterday we were at University of Massachusetts at Dartmouth. They have an Indian center there. They gave a very nice talk. And today we're going to talk about Rama and Ayodhya. So a little bit of background. So Koenraad Elst is a Belgian Orientalist and Indologist known for his writings on comparative religion, Hindu-Muslim relations, and Indian history. He was born to a Flemish Catholic family. Some of his family members were Christian missionaries. He graduated in Indology, Sinology, and Philosophy at Catholic University of Leuven. Around that time, he became interested in Flemish nationalism. Between 1988 and 1992, he was at Banaras Hindu University. In 1999, he received a PhD from Catholic University of Leuven. His doctoral dissertation on Hindu revivalism was published as a book, Decolonizing the Hindu Mind. If any of you have a chance, I recommend you read that book, Decolonizing the Hindu Mind. Elst, known for his support of the out-of-India theory related to Indo-Aryan migration, has also written about multiculturalism, language policy issues, ancient Chinese philosophy and history, and comparative religion. He became identified with Hindutva politics during the 1990s, following his support for the Bharatiya Janata Party's position on the Rama Janmabhoomi temple in Ayodhya, and in parallel with the BJP's rise to prominence on the national stage. Everyone, Dr. Elst.
Yes, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The controversy of Ayodhya is, of course, a side effect of the cult throughout India of Rama. I don't think I need to introduce Rama, who is present over there. Rama was one of the kings of the solar dynasty, placed in Ayodhya, founded by Manu Ayodhya, and his son Ikshvaku. So Ayodhya is not just the city of Rama, it had already a long history before him. And all the religious figures show up in Ayodhya, or also have been born in Ayodhya, like Adinatha, the first of the 24 Tirthankaras of Jainism. The Buddha himself visited Ayodhya several times. And so Rama himself was born there to King Dasharatha and Kaushalya. That he is a historical character is not in doubt. You see that lineage throughout has been well preserved in the Indian dynastic king lists in the Puranas. So a number of Puranas have these king lists with little variations, which only witnesses to their authenticity. It shows that it's not one invention that was then copied by all the others. No, you see, when people witness an authentic event, usually their versions are a little bit different, even though you can still see that they are talking of the same event. So here also there are slightly different versions of these king lists, but they are really clearly talking about the same solar dynasty to which Rama belonged. Then he married Sita, and then Sita got abducted. From there on, we are not so sure anymore about history, in the sense that the abduction of a wife is an event that often happens in history. Like, for instance, the Iliad by Homer in Greece is also based on or triggered by the abduction of the wife Helen of King Menelaus. And so it's something that frequently has happened in history. So strictly speaking, you could doubt the historicity. Then again, precisely because it is something that happens so often, why would they have to attribute it to any random king if it didn't happened to that king. So there is certainly a core of truth in it, even though the story has been embellished somewhat later on and streamlined ideologically to fit the Brahminical narrative. But basically it's just simply correct, and it paints Rama as a perfect human being, the Maryada Purushottam, because mainly he is faithful, because he has loyalty to his filial duties towards his father, loyal also to his wife, and loyal to his people. So, the temple was built for him. Originally, there was no temple culture in India. In the Vedic age, people worshipped in the open air, and they still often do.
Conrad, let me know if you want me to advance the slide at which point we're at.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, I'm only just coming to that.
Okay.
Leave this slide.
Okay.
Okay. So we're talking here about the historical Rama, and that historical Rama is the object of the first of 3 historical debates. We've had a big Ayodhya controversy the last decades, so there are really 3 debates within that debate. And so one is about the historical character Rama. The second is about what happened in the Middle Ages. So first there was no culture of temples, later it came about, and we have successive temples built at the contentious site in Ayodhya, of which several in fact were demolished in the Middle Ages. And then the third debate is about what we should do today. See, there's a question of who Rama was, did Rama live, and so did he live there. Then there's the second question about the Middle Ages. Was the temple demolished? Who demolished it? Why did they demolish it? And the third question is, whatever all this history, what should we do now? Should this be based on this history, or should we deny and ignore this history? Should we build this temple, yes or no? Next. So the first question concerns the ancient history and the so-called eminent historians. The leftist historians have made a big show of that, because it is probably the weakest point in the Hindu argumentation. Namely because there is no proof that he was born there. There is of course a testimony, there is a story that he was born there, already a very old story by Valmiki, but nevertheless it's only a story. And so, you see, these communists are very down-to-earth, materialistic. They like to drag down religious stories to a very ordinary level. Like, for instance, they're going to say, oh, but you see, this Valmiki, he was a cafe restaurant owner in some place in Ayodhya, and to attract a lot of business, he created the story that this was a place of pilgrimage for some famous character, Rama. And so he invented it all. Who knows? Well, who knows? Now, I can argue against that. Our time is limited. I will not argue against that. Let's take the worst case scenario. Let's assume that Rama never existed, that he was invented by some local, person with interests. Nevertheless, Rama is the Maryada Purushottam for hundreds of millions of people who do go on pilgrimage there. Now, with other religious figures, you have a similar situation, or sometimes even worse, where you have really no basis in fact, and so secular governments don't mind. Usually their view of religion is that, all kinds of stories are told by religious people, but, to sort of channel the religious urges of the people, okay, we don't ask questions, we simply accept as fact that religion is being practiced, and then, we go by that basic fact. For example, in France, there is a militantly secularist government throughout the 20th and the 21st century of people who laugh at religion. Now, in France in 1858, there was an apparition of the Virgin Mary, who supposedly became visible for a young girl, and she reported this to the local priest, and ultimately this place where the Virgin Mary supposedly appeared became a place of pilgrimage called Lourdes. Now in Paris, in political circles, they laugh at this story. But then again, they just notice as a fact that many pilgrims go there, also from outside of France, and there the financial angle comes in. Oh yeah, our hotels and so on thrive thanks to all these foreign pilgrims. Anyway, so they just look at the practical side of things. They say, okay, this pilgrimage exists, and so they facilitate this pilgrimage. And they don't ask questions. You see, when some pilgrim comes, they don't ask him, okay, now you first prove that the Virgin Mary appeared there. Before that, we won't allow you to go there. They don't say to the Catholics, no, you cannot have a center of pilgrimage there unless you prove that the Virgin Mary appeared. Well, you see, that's simply not how it goes. Secular governments just accept the fact of religion and also specific religious beliefs, regardless of whether they're true or not. It's not the job of a government to judge in these matters. Next. In fact, I said it could get even worse. In the case of St. Thomas in South India, there is not even doubt. In the case of Rama, you could doubt. In the case of the Virgin Mary in Lourdes, you could doubt. In the case of Thomas, you know for sure that the religious beliefs about him are not true. You see, he did not come to South India. Even the only written source that says that he came to India, but India in the large sense, describes him as going to a desert-like country where they speak Persian. Okay, so he's going to Afghanistan thereabouts, not to Kerala, what Christians believe. And he's certainly not being killed by Brahmins, in Chennai, as Christians believe. In fact, his death is described, and he is not murdered by Brahmins. So, there we know for sure that the religious tradition is not true. We don't even have doubt whether it is true or not. No, we know it is not true. And yet, still, every politician in India who talks about Christianity, pays lip service to this whole story of St. Thomas. Even if they know it's not true. Okay. Now here, the question is whether there was a temple at the site. Now there archaeology comes in and it just dug up a temple for centuries before the Middle Ages, before the supposed demolition. So yes, there was a temple there. Now was that at the site? There we are less sure. The archaeologists have dug up signs of human habitation on the spot itself, going back to about 1500 BC. Now that's not enough. You see, the solar dynasty existed since much earlier, maybe 6000 BC. And Rama himself probably lived a lot earlier, in the Vedic age, maybe 2500, 3000 BC. And in fact, some people in India believe it's much earlier, 700,000 BC, right? So that is not confirmed by archaeology. This could be explained, namely by a story in the Koenraad, that King Vikramaditya rediscovered the present site, so that the present site goes back at least to Vikramaditya, 1st century BC. And you see, he had rediscovered the place after it had been abandoned by its citizens. And effectively, this is told in the Ramayana, that after Rama's death, the people of Ayodhya vacate the city. And so modern historians suggest, well, if they vacated the city after 2 generations, they forgot about the city. Nobody knew where the city was. And so this Vikramaditya, either he simply invented it, that the city was there, or he went by criteria that today would not stand scrutiny. Like, for example, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Krishna worshipping saint, he went to Vrindavan and he felt like, oh, this must be where Krishna grew up. And ever since, Vrindavan is a sacred place for Krishna worshippers. So maybe it's not more than that, that we can't be absolutely sure of. Then again, we know that even before Vikramaditya, the site was a Jain and Buddhist site, among other things. And so the Buddhist sources are pretty secure about this, that that city remained the same, that the city that the Buddha visited around 500 BC, that is the same place where Vikramaditya went, where later people went, so that is the same place as today. So again, you see there is an element of uncertainty. Next. But so that element of uncertainty is not important from a secular viewpoint. The secular government just accepts the fact that there's a pilgrimage to the site. The temple disappeared. You see there were several temples, several successively more sophisticated and bigger temples. Now, there was a really big temple built in the 11th century. Why was it built? Because, according to me, an earlier temple had been violently demolished. Now we know from other sources that the city had been conquered by Salar Masud Ghaznavi, who was the nephew of the famous invader Mahmud Ghaznavi. And so both uncle and nephew were fired up by a zeal to destroy idolatry. So of Salar Masud Ghaznavi, we can very safely assume that he destroyed any important temple he found in his way. Fortunately for the Hindus, 3 years later he was defeated in the Battle of Bahraich and killed, namely by a coalition of Hindu kings with Sukadeva and the famous philosopher king Raja Bhoja. So they defeated Salar Masud Ghaznavi, nothing was heard of him, and so Hindu rule in Ayodhya was restored. A magnificent temple was rebuilt, or was built, but better than the one that stood there before, really big one. And that is the temple of which the remains have been dug up by the Archaeological Survey of India in 2010. However, we don't know what happened. We know that the temple was demolished. All we have is the foundations of the temple and then some stray remains, some bits and pieces that have been, broken down and then fell into the ground. And so from then on we don't know exactly what happened. So everybody says, including the local Muslims, that the temple was demolished. And yes, it was very, very certainly demolished. Only we don't know by whom. Or in fact, I'm pretty sure I know by whom. Namely by Shah Zura Ghori, the nephew of the conqueror of India, of northern India, Muhammad Ghori. As you know, he defeated Prithviraj Chauhan in 1192. And so the next 2 years, his lieutenants go on all through the Ganga plain, conquer the whole of northern India. and destroy every Hindu religious building that they can find. They destroyed 1,000 Hindu temples in Varanasi. They destroyed the Buddhist temples, including the Nalanda University, the biggest university in the world, which burned for 3 months. So big was it, and so they wanted to destroy it. They destroyed the building as well as its inmates. And so they also destroyed the temples in Ayodhya. There was a temple there for Adinath, the first guru of Jainism. That was replaced with a mosque that is still in existence, the Shasuran Gori Mosque. But they also destroyed all the other temples, and so they must have destroyed the Rama temple that was standing there. If you say that they didn't demolish that temple, and that that temple was still standing there in 1526 to be demolished by Baba, then you are simply not taking serious the Islamic doctrine of iconoclasm. Yes, I'm going to talk about the Islamic doctrine of iconoclasm. Now here I'm looking fearfully at the temple managers, because in some temples I've been asked to leave to take my talk elsewhere, because they don't want any talk about religious conflict. Well, you see, unpleasant as it is, religious conflict is a fact of life and certainly a fact of Indian history. So, to say that that big temple was in existence till 1526 and that then it was demolished by Baba, as for example the Vishwa Hindu Parishad does, to say such a thing means or implies that a temple, a big, huge Hindu temple to which millions of people came on pilgrimage, that was left standing in front of a Muslim governor's house. You see, Ayodhya was a provincial capital of the Delhi Sultanate, which was the most ruthless anti-pagan, iconoclastic regime in history. It was a pretty violent regime even for Muslims. Like normally in an imperial harem, the women plot against one another in order to make sure that their own son becomes the successor to the throne. In the Delhi Sultanate it was the reverse. You see, all the harem women thought, oh my God, you see, if my son becomes the heir apparent, everybody's going to try to kill him and his whole family along with him. Now let's make sure he doesn't become the next king. So it was a very violent regime, and especially for the Hindus. So you see, to think that that governor would have looked out every morning to this building just next to his, where all these idolaters came year after year, in their thousands, in their millions, that beggars belief. That's so improbable. So I'm pretty sure that the temple was destroyed. Now that those same foundations were used for building a mosque, that mosque was very probably the Babri Masjid. Now here we are not sure. We are not sure when the Babri Masjid was built. You see, stones are not organic material. With organic material you can apply the C14 test of the archaeologist that tells you more or less how old the subject is. But with stone, no such luck. And so we are not sure. However, the art historians say that the building style of the Babri Masjid was not typical for the 16th century, that it was in fact typical for the 14th century. So they say, both pro and anti-temple scholars say that this mosque must have been old. So perhaps that was the mosque built after the temple was demolished in 1193 or 94. Alternatively, the place may have been left empty. Or, strictly speaking, it is also possible that the temple was left standing but transformed into a mosque. At any rate, functionally, it was definitely a mosque standing there. Then, when Babar came in, the Sultanate regime became very unstable, and so it is possible, and no positive indication of it, but it is possible that the Hindus, in those circumstances, managed to reconquer the site and re-employ it. If there was a mosque standing there, they may have used the mosque as a temple. This is effectively what happened between 1949 and 1992, when it was demolished. There was a mosque standing there, but it was used as a temple. So that may be the situation when Babar appeared on the scene, and so he destroyed again the Hindu presence at the site, the Hindu use of the site as a temple. So he made...
Can you make the microphone a little bit closer?
Yeah, okay.
It's getting echo back there. I think it's pretty close. Okay.
All right, can you hear me? Right, so we do not have all the details. We do know that Babar restored a fully Islamic presence there and the use of the building as a mosque. So it was a mosque then. You can go to the next. Right, so this is about the doctrine of iconoclasm. The doctrine of iconoclasm is based on the behavior by Muhammad, who destroyed all the idols existing in Arabia. And he himself set the standard when he conquered Mecca and he entered the Kaaba. Today the Kaaba only has this black stone that they worship, but back then it had 360 murtis. So there were a number of different sampradayas even in Arabia. There was also Christianity, so they had a picture or a statue of Jesus and one of the Virgin Mary. And then they had all the other gods, like Hubal, like Allah, Al-Uzza, Manat, and so on. And so all the gods had a presence there, so that every Arab who came there on pilgrimage could worship his own deity. Because of course the Arabs went there on pilgrimage long before Muhammad. The Hajj is not an Islamic invention. In fact, Islam came too late on the scene to invent anything. The only original element in Islam is the worship or the veneration for the Prophet Muhammad. Otherwise, all the good things as well as all the bad things in Islam were borrowed from somewhere else, including the pilgrimage. But so the pilgrimage is one of the good things about Islam. You see, Hindus should understand the custom of pilgrimage, and so other people do the same thing. But so Muhammad tried to put an end to that. He maintained the pilgrimage, but no longer to worship any murti. He destroyed all the murtis. And so later all the Arab or Islamic conquerors, both outside of India and in India, invoked that example to justify their own iconoclasm, their own destruction of murtis. So whatever happened in Ayodhya, it had happened 1,000 times before. Next. Right, nowadays they try to whitewash it, either to deny it, to simply say, oh, it's an ugly, vicious Hindu nationalist concoction that there was any Islamic iconoclasm. Now that is just too ridiculous to consider. Some do say that. Others are a bit more circumspect. They say, after the American Marxist historian Richard Eaton, that only 80 temples were destroyed. Now, in fact, we have the autobiography, the biography of Al-Araki, who came from Iraq, to Pak-occupied Kashmir, or what is today Pak-occupied Kashmir, Gilgit and Baltistan, a Shiite, and there it is described how he destroys temple after temple after temple. This is a very thinly populated mountainous area, but even he in his life destroyed already far more than 80 temples. So to say only 80 temples were destroyed in all of India in all of 1,000 years, that is just absolutely laughable. Moreover, if you read Gita, you see that he doesn't mean 80 temples, he means 80 cases of temple destruction. For example, among his list of 80, he mentions the temple destructions in 1193 by Muhammad Ghori's troops in Varanasi. But he adds himself that 1,000 temples were destroyed in Varanasi. So one in his list of 80 actually means 1,000. So even he doesn't say only 80 temples were demolished. So it was many thousands that were demolished, already tens of thousands by Aurangzeb alone. You see, under Akbar, 16th century, Hindus had again given license to build or rebuild their temples. Because Akbar made some kind of a compromise. You know, in order to stabilize his empire, he wanted to stop the Hindu resistance, the Hindu rebellions. So he gave the Hindus not all they wanted, but enough to appease the big majority among them. And so he allowed them to rebuild their temples. But then his great-grandson Aurangzeb changed his mind about that. And he again, he reintroduced the toleration tax, or jizya, to make the Hindus third-class citizens. And he gave orders to demolish all the temples. And this is all described in his own court chronicles. And the reports of all the different governors and generals who say, okay, I went to this town and I destroyed this many temples. Well, there's a whole list. There is no denying that, even though the American academic Audrey Truschke has recently tried to do just that. Okay, so very many temples were destroyed. So what happened in Ayodhya was not a one-off event. It is just one instance of a general policy that covered the whole Islamic world, including the whole of India, for more than 1,000 years. And this is a bit of a point of contention because the BJP has tried to use the issue for electoral purposes, and with some success. In 1989 and in 1991, it won the elections thanks to Ayodhya, going from 2 seats in parliament to 130 thereabouts, and becoming the official opposition party. And so the main party after Congress, which it has remained till now. And if today there is a BJP government in power, it has Ayodhya to thank for that. But it did so at a certain price, which in my opinion it did not have to pay at all. But so they chose to do it that way. They concentrated fully on this one temple mosque in Ayodhya, remaining silent about all the other destroyed temples. You know, even the acharyas, they were demanding the liberation of 3 sites: Ayodhya, the Kashi Vishwanath in Benares, and the Krishna Janmabhoomi in Mathura. Even those 2 others they wanted to strike down from the list, let alone the thousands of others. So they wanted to have this little toy in Ayodhya and otherwise get it over with. Well, you see, one thing that the Ayodhya Fair should have done, may still do, is to educate the Hindus about this doctrine of Islamic iconoclasm that has far more effects throughout India than this one case in Ayodhya. Next. Nira?
Yes, sorry.
Right. So in my opinion, there were 3 demolitions, one by Salar Massoud Ghaznavi in 1030, one by Shah Janmabhoomi in about 1193, and then one by Babar in 1526, of which we do not know whether he demolished the building or merely stopped the Hindu presence at the site. But in all 3 cases, the object was the same. It was not demolished to demolish a building or a murti, it was to destroy a religion. There is a big difference in Mesopotamia, for instance, and perhaps allegedly also a few times in India. You have cases where pagan kings, polytheist, idolatrous kings, conquer a piece of territory belonging to their enemy, and to celebrate their victory, they steal a murti from the main temple and take it home and put it in their own main temple. Now that's something completely different. First of all, they don't destroy the murti, or they don't humiliate it like the Muslim kings who took a murti and then, built it into lavatories or, floors that people would walk on with dirty shoes or so, to just show their contempt for that murti. That had nothing to do with it. In those cases, you see, one king would continue the worship of the other king. He would also let the defeated people continue their worship. If you took, let's say, a Shiva statue, you would continue to worship Shiva in your own temple, and you would allow these other people also to continue their Shiva worship, even though they had to consecrate a new murti. But otherwise, everything remained the same. Whereas in the case of Islam, the intention was not to leave everything the same. It was to destroy religion. In fact, Aurangzeb sent his spies to find out in the places where he had destroyed temples and murtis, whether the Hindus had not started again to worship him. Because you see, the Hindus resisted. They didn't take it lying down. They were often militarily not in a position to rebuild their temples, but secretly they continued to worship their murtis. At least those they tried to save. You see, often on the spur of the moment, you see, the Islamic army was already there. All they could do was to throw it in a nearby river. And then later, when the army was gone, they would dig it up and maybe worship it under a tree or so, make do, with whatever was possible. But so Hindus did not take it lying down. This is all described very well in a recent book by Meenakshi Jain about the next step of the story of iconoclasm. We know the Islamic doctrine of iconoclasm. We know its application on numerous Hindu temples in India. But so the closing part of it is, and how the Hindus react. Well, they reacted as good, as bravely as they could, and they restored as much as they could. Next. Right, yeah, that's the story I told you. Next. Right, so this is the unknown demolition by Ghaznavi. So we don't have any documentation about it, but we know that it must have taken place. Yes? Next.
Question, I don't know, well, maybe we'll ask it again.
Yeah.
The second bullet point about Hindu alliance. Sometimes people talk about Hindus not working together. There's a very interesting example from history.
Yeah, I think a movie should be made about it. Of course, I know that this is difficult to make movies about Hindu successes. Like I know in 2003 there were plans to make a movie of some battle between the British and the Peshwas. And the Peshwas in reality, as well as in the projected movie, win. Now, the communists in Bollywood thought, oh my God, you see, this is going to fire up the Hindus, give them more self-confidence and so on. We have to prevent this. So there was a petition by all the communists in the film industry and writers and so on to prevent the making of this movie, and they succeeded. The movie was never made. So I think now the atmosphere is ripe for making such movies anyway. And so this is a beautiful topic. You see, there you have Hindus getting together, indeed a lesson for the Hindus of the day. It is quite possible to achieve some measure of unity, even if only temporary, only provoked by the need to defeat this particular enemy, but still they go together. They achieve success. It's a movie with a happy end. Moreover, it's colorful. It has a colorful character, Raja Bhoja, the philosopher king. So, you know, you can make it a good, pleasant movie with a happy end. Everybody will go home elated. So this movie absolutely should be made. You know, there are more episodes in Hindu history like that. So I think now the time is right to set to work about this. And next. Right, this is a summing up of all the demolitions. This is in more detail. Okay, next. Right, so the Janmabhoomi during the Sultanate, as I said, cannot have been the site of a Hindu pilgrimage. That the Muslims would certainly not tolerate it. Next. Right, so about these demolitions, we know for very sure that it was demolished by Islamic iconoclasm. Which person it was, when exactly it was, there is a little dispute, not much. We know that Babur destroyed something. What it was, we don't know exactly. We know that Shah destroyed the temple. We know that Salar Masud Ghaznavi destroyed the temple. So there is some work. You know, there is still something to do for historians. But as far as the question of did Muslims demolish the temple is concerned, we know the answer. Yes, they did. Next. Right, so Babur played a role in it, so it makes sense to call this mosque the Babur Mosque, though we don't know exactly what he did, whether he built it from scratch or rebuilt it or redefined its status as a mosque. But he played a role in it, so it makes sense to call it the Babur Mosque. Next. So indeed, you see, the story of the persons is not so very important. Like the whitewash by Audrey Trushka of Aurangzeb is not very important, you see. She claims that Aurangzeb was a good man and so on. Yes, he was a good man, or at any rate, he was a very pious man. Like you see, his father was a hedonist, and you know, he was like a Congress politician, you see, very corrupt, squandering public money on his own favorite pastimes, like he built this romantic grave, in fact, namely the Taj Mahal. And so Aurangzeb thought this was scandalous, this was a waste of public money. He never wanted to do that. He didn't even want to live himself as the head of state. Even that he didn't want to be paid from the exchequer. So he himself earned his living by making these white hats that Muslims wear and selling them at market price. Now, that same asceticism comes from his religious piety, and it is the exact same motive that explains his iconoclasm. That was also Islamic piety. You see, if he had been a pious Buddhist, a pious Vedantin, he would piously have practiced a lot of meditation. Maybe he would have built some temples and so on, have done peaceful religious things. By contrast, a pious Muslim would do other things. But from an Islamic view, they are pious, namely destroy temples. So you see, whatever we know about the person Aurangzeb is not important. We know of the doctrine of iconoclasm, and it is that which motivated all these temple destructions. Next. Right, so there is a complete consensus that there had been a temple there and it was destroyed by Islamic idolaters. There was a court case in the 1880s where all the parties concerned, including the local Muslims, including European travelers, including the British authorities, agreed that there had been a temple there and that it had been demolished to make way for a mosque. But the British judge ruled, since this is already centuries ago, it's a bit too late to fuss about it, so let's have the status quo, so let the mosque remain. Strictly speaking, this was against British policy. You see, the British wanted to have peace in their empire, not because they were so peaceful, but simply because they wanted to make money, so they didn't want any religious quarrels. And so to have the mosque planted there on the Hindu side of pilgrimage was sure to cause more religious conflict. So in fact, if they had thought twice, they would have left the place to the Hindus then already, because that meant peace. You see, Muslims are not attached to this place. Initially, of course, they would, quarrel about their mosque that was taken from them, but this mosque had no importance to them. No Muslim ever goes on pilgrimage to Ayodhya. Whereas for Hindus, it's not a temple that is important, it is that site that is important, even when there's a mosque imposed on. So Hindus kept coming there, and if Muslims were there because there was a mosque, then that would mean endless conflict. And so in the 1930s, it was the same story all over. There were riots, and then the British said, well, okay, let's close the place down. No Muslims, no Hindus. So the Hindus were still allowed to worship outside the mosque. There was an open-air altar, and so they could go there. And indeed, you see, they kept coming there because they were attached to the site, to which they kept coming as closely as possible. So the building was standing empty. In 1949, local Hindus smuggled the murtis of Rama, Sita and Lakshman into the building, and then worship started. Nehru tried to reverse the situation, but the local authorities didn't want to go that far. They merely closed the building. They only allowed the priest to go in to perform the rituals. That was the situation until 1986, when another judge ordered the locks to be opened and the building to become a fully functional Hindu temple where all Hindus had access. This was partly thanks to pressure from the movement for the liberation of Rama's birthplace, a movement that had been started in 1983, of which the first chairman was Swami Ayodhya, who was personally the guru of the present Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh, Yogi Adityanath. Right? He was at that time a member of parliament, the only member of parliament, I think, for the Hindu Mahasabha. So he was not an RSS person. And the convener of this whole movement was Gulzari Lal Nanda, who was a top Congress politician, a former interim prime minister. After the death of Lal Bahadur Shastri, before Indira could be brought to power, he took charge of the prime minister's functions. So this was Gulzari Lal Nanda. He in fact started the movement for the liberation of Janmabhoomi. So this was not a BJP movement initially. It was far more Congress than BJP that started it. And there was even talk of Rajiv Gandhi, the Prime Minister, laying the first stone of the prospective temple. This was in 1989. Finally, it was not Rajiv Gandhi, but his Home Minister, Bhutta Singh, who did participate in the ceremony. So this ceremony and so this idea of building a round temple at the site very much had the blessings of Congress. But then you see something very unfortunate happen. Next. The start of a controversy. So the so-called eminent historians, that's what the newspapers always call them, and what they call each other. The eminent historians, which is the communist historians of Jawaharlal Nehru, supported by other historians from Aligarh University, they issued a statement called The Political Abuse of History, Janmabhoomi Babri Masjid, in which they stated that there had never been a temple at the site, that this was all a Hindu concoction. Now they could have said, no, you see, this, like the British judge in 1886, they could have said, yes, okay, we know that a temple was demolished, but since this happened already centuries ago, why bother? Let bygones be bygones. You know, they could have taken that position. That would have been a bit easier to defend. That would have been a harder nut to crack for the Hindus. But they didn't. You see, the power position that secularism had in India was so big, so unassailable, that it had gone to their heads. And so they thought they could get away with telling a blatant lie. And you see, for historians to tell such a blatant lie about history is really rich. They went really very far. But you see, that lie paid off, because it scared off the politicians. As I said, you see, the temple movement was supported by Congress. Now, when the historians declared, supported by the entire media, which are important for politicians because they have a great influence on public opinion and therefore on the voters, right? Because the historians said, no, you see, you can never allow this. This is a lie. This is a concoction. There was no temple there. You know, Hindus should not build a temple there. In fact, the Babri Masjid is the last bulwark of secularism. It protects us against the end of the world. Terrible things will happen if this Babri Masjid comes down, if these ugly, vicious, disgusting Hindus build a temple there. So you see, this must be defended at all costs. Now, at that point, many politicians thought, oh my God, I can't get away with supporting this temple. Who knows what they're going to say about me? So then the situation changed, and very temporarily the BJP seized the issue. And so thanks to the emotions around the Janmabhoomi, they won the elections of 1990 in a big way, from 2 seats to 86, and then they won even more 2 years later, when they became the official opposition. So the BJP had done a very good, very profitable business with involving themselves in this movement. But as soon as they reaped the electoral harvest, they puked it out like a hot potato. Yes. Next. So the BJP recuperated the issue. It won thanks to the issue. Then it disowned the issue. In 1992, there was a big ceremony in Ayodhya, led by BJP leader Advani. But no promise was made regarding the fate of the building. So the BJP was pussyfooting, was dithering, was hesitating. At the same time, the Supreme Court was expected to give a decision that would greatly help the matter onwards, would bring closer the building of a temple. But the Supreme Court also postponed its decision. till after this Hindu gathering. Now the Hindu gathering took place nevertheless, and so many of these young activists were impatient and didn't want to wait for L.K. Advani and these other old fogies to finally come to business. So they took the law into their own hands. Now, L.K. Advani was not involved. In fact, he was very surprised by what happened, and he broke down in tears because the fabled RSS discipline had broken down. But it is not true that there was no one in the RSS BJP movement that didn't have a hand in it, or there was no one that had a hand in it. Someone did, namely Moro Pingle, one of the top leaders of the RSS, knew all about it. He probably did part of the planning. The technical planning was done by an engineer also belonging to the RSS. His name I will not say. For me as a foreigner, you know, it was very easy to find out his identity, 2 phone calls, and I knew. So for all these Delhi journalists of the Times of India and the Navabharat Times and Aaj and you know and the TV station at that time, the state TV, Doordarshan and so on, they knew all the ins and outs of all these political clubs, and so they knew they could perfectly easily have found out who masterminded the demolition. You see, he trained a few volunteers about what to do, where to put ropes so that you could pull the structure down. And then you see when the building came tottering down and everybody jumped in, to take his own brick and then take it home as a souvenir. That's what happened. So that the mosque was entirely gone by evening. But so this mastermind, it could easily have been found out, but yet the entire Indian press forewent the occasion to have the scoop of the year, the scoop of the century, and publish on its front page, a photograph of this man. This man demolished the Babi Masjid. That would have sold many newspapers. But you see, none of them did, because all of them were so eager to put L.K. Advani on the defensive. So they all claimed, it's L.K. Advani is guilty. And the whole Lieberhand Commission, the whole allegation against the BJP and so on was based on that. Now, this is frankly untrue. I also know of people who were present, the people around L.K. Advani, that he was totally unprepared for this. Arun Shauri, for example, was there. And so when L.K. Advani was incapable of doing anything, he quickly wrote a speech, a statement, that then when the press came to ask Advani, come on, say something, that he just had to read from the paper references, for example, to all the temples in Kashmir that had been demolished just before, that nobody had made a fuss about. So that was the best statement he could make in the circumstances. But so it was not his, and he did not stand behind the demolition. He never approved of it. A few years later, in his autobiography, he called it the blackest day in his life. But so you were not allowed to know about this by the Indian secularist press. Next. So the BJP discourse does not focus on the problem of Islamic iconoclasm. It does not even mention the cases of Mathura and Kashi. It simply wants this little toy because the BJP noticed that this has a lot of popular appeal, so they wanted to cash in on that. They also said that they focused on Hindu sentiments. Now, again, you see that's skirting the issue, that's avoiding the issue. You see, when somebody breaks into your house and steals from you, You don't go to court because you are sentimentally attached to the jewelry that has been stolen. No, you go there because it is your property. It is your right. This fellow has no right to steal your jewelry. Okay? So the Hindu position is, this place is ours. You see, Muslims who are squatting on it with their little mosque there, they are in the wrong. They have no leg to stand on. They should vacate the site and leave it to the Hindus. That is the correct juridical position. And so to start talking about sentiments, that is really just avoiding the real issue. That's not daring to say Muslims are in the wrong. And then, yes, they also made it into a nationhood issue. You see, this is the RSS talk. Nowadays it goes even farther than in those days. Nowadays they say every Indian is a Hindu. And so they have scrapped the word Hindu from their vocabulary. They always say India nowadays. Like for instance, I myself wrote a book called Decolonizing the Hindu Mind. Now they have grabbed that phrase and they organize conferences on decolonizing the Indian mind. Now, what is this? You see, the bishops are not colonized. Salahuddin Owaisi is not colonized. He doesn't care about all the demands that Hindus might have. But Hindus, you see, they have something to win back. They have confidence to rebuild. They have their own history to discover. It is the Hindu mind that needs decolonization, not the Indian mind. All right? And so here, for example, they always said, it is a contest between the Indian hero Rama and the foreign invader Baba. No, that is not true. You see, there have been foreign invaders who were not in the business of destroying temples. The Shakals and the Hunas and the Greeks and so on, they did not destroy temples. In Sanchi, there is this pillar by Heliodorus. He was an ambassador of the Greek kingdom in Afghanistan. And he came there to worship Vishnu. And his pillar has this big murti on top of it. That's what he did. He didn't destroy, no, he built, he added to the rich array of Hindu murtis. Then the British. You see, the British destroyed a lot. They destroyed institutionally. They destroyed the whole Indian economy. They destroyed the Hindu education system. And so, India paid a big price economically. Many people died in famines that were not necessary, that were provoked by British economic policies. Right? And yet, you see, these evil British, they never destroyed temples. On the contrary, in many cases, they brought archaeology, they brought temples back to life. They discovered Ajanta and Ellora and so on. And they wrote big books about it. They rediscovered the Sanskrit language, or they discovered it for themselves. And so they rediscovered all kinds of ancient scriptures. Like, for instance, the Kautilya Arthashastra that had gone lost centuries ago. The British rediscovered it. The British deciphered the language on the Ashoka pillars, the Brahmi script, and so on. So the British greatly contributed to traditional Hindu culture. They didn't destroy it. So the fact that they were foreign is immaterial to their policy regarding Hindu temples. Right. Then, Malik Kafur, for example, he was a Hindu slave forcibly converted to Islam, and as soon as he was a good Muslim, he started destroying temples. Now, he was not foreign, right? But he was not Hindu. That's what made him do it. He was Islamic. He was not foreign. So, you should say, no, this was a contest between the Hindu hero Rama and the Islamic invader Babur, or the Islamic ruler Babur. He needn't even have been an invader. Aurangzeb was not an invader, yet he also destroyed temples. Not because he was non-Indian, not because he was foreign, but because he was Islamic. Next. Then it is said that Hindus wanted to take revenge, that the Hindu motive for building a temple was revenge. Now, revenge has nothing to do with it. You see, revenge would mean to go and destroy all the mosques, to kill all the Muslims. Or, as the American intelligence used to say in the 1990s, this was attributed to the BJP as their secret program when they came to power was to throw all the Indian Muslims into the Indian Ocean. Right? Now that had nothing to do with it. That would be revenge. But that's not what the Hindus were planning to do in Ayodhya. They were going to rebuild their temple. They were going to restore something, which is something else than to take revenge. And anyway, the history has nothing to do with it. Next, I'll tell you why. Oh, the demolition, we know about that next. The demolition was, of course, not dishonorable. I'll come back to answer my question, don't worry. But the demolition was not dishonorable at all. In fact, it was the only course left open by the inaction of the Supreme Court and of the BJP leadership. But moreover, you see, what the Koenraad are blamed for is to trigger a lot of riots. Now, in fact, riots were taking place all over India already for years. And if the Babri Masjid had been left standing, that would constantly have triggered more riots. That would constantly have encouraged the Muslims to reclaim the site. So what they actually did was to save lives. In the immediate aftermath, indeed, a few hundred lives were lost, mainly through the actions by Muslims. Because of course it was not the Hindus, but the Muslims who were angry with the demolition of their mosque. Right? So it is the Muslims who started killing people. And indeed, in a historically significant way. On 12 March 1993, in Mumbai, the Muslims staged a new form of terrorism at a whole number of places in the city, including the important places like the stock exchange. They had explosives detonated at the same time. This was a new form of terrorism, to take a city and to attack it at a number of places at the same time. This would later happen again in Delhi, in Srinagar, in New York, in London, in Paris, and so on. So you see, the whole pattern of Islamic terrorism since then has followed the model that was created in Mumbai in 1993 as part of the Ayodhya controversy. Right? Now that's the kind of thing you would have had on a large scale within India if this mosque had not been demolished. You see, it was necessary to do that. It was the hard part of the Congress policy of ultimately building the temple. And that was the part that Congress politicians hesitated about. Now, when Congress Prime Minister Narasimha Rao saw on his TV how the Koenraad were starting the demolition, he heaved a sigh of relief. You see, as a Congress power broker, of course he wanted to give the Hindus this and then a few goodies to appease the Muslim leadership. So the old style Congress horse trading. And that way he tried to diffuse this conflict. But you see, the secularists were continually egging the Muslims on to keep the conflict alive. And so he was a bit apprehensive about what should happen to the mosque. Should we demolish the mosque? How, when, how are we going to sell this to the public? He didn't know what to do. Then the Karsevaks were doing it for him. And so he thought, oh my God, this is very useful. Because as a politician, he could put the BJP on the defensive. You know, everybody in the media was going to blame the BJP, no matter who did it. And so that was very profitable for the Congress party. And then as a Hindu, as a committed Hindu, because that he also was, it was a very good thing that the mosque was demolished, because that was the main hurdle before the building of the temple. Right? So, in fact, you see, the Karsevaks did a favor to the Indian people and to the government of the day. Right, next. Yeah, of course, there's been a trial going on since 1950 about the whole case. The High Court in Uttar Pradesh finally gave a verdict after 60 years, 30 September 2010, mainly giving the place to the Hindus, you know, having ordered the excavations, having found and certified the existence of the temple. They then gave a verdict informed by the acceptance that yes, the temple existed. But then you see all the parties in court wanted more and went to the Supreme Court. So for 9 years already, the Supreme Court is considering the case. Now the last thing is that they appointed a committee of 3 people to mediate it. For the Hindu side, it is mostly done by Sri Ravi Shankar, who is not a very combative Hindu. But who knows, I mean, given his very meritorious work of setting up a network of meditation centers in the Middle East, he mostly appeases Muslims. His writings on Islam are very uninformed, very silly, very appeasing, but nevertheless, he may have gotten quite some experience by now with Muslims. Maybe something good comes of it. At first sight, I would say he's the worst placed Hindu in the world to take up this mediator role, but nevertheless, maybe something good comes out. Anyway, he was planted there by the Supreme Court in the hope that he would not defend the Hindu interest well, because unlike the UP High Court, the Supreme Court is a hotbed of secularism. And so they are probably going to try everything to give the Hindus as little as possible. But we don't know. You see, this mediation lasts till August, and then after that the Supreme Court still can take its time to give a verdict, so maybe this will not be very soon. Maybe it will, you know, that's right now in their hands. Next. Okay, well anyway, the evidence debate will come to that. I was going to deal with a particular question. What was the question again? Anyone following my thread? Okay.
You were talking
The revenge thing, and then?
was it dishonorable?
Yeah, right. Okay, it was not dishonorable. It was a good thing that this was demolished. Everybody profited from it. It helped history forward. So, of course, it was a bit chaotic. It cost some lives, but comparatively few. And so, in the world, the grown-ups, sometimes you have to think of the economy of violence. Sometimes you have to put in a little violence to prevent large violence. Something that absolutists of non-violence like Mahatma Gandhi never understood. But so mature people have to take this kind of decision in their lives. So I think, you see, when we take a sober look at the event, it was a good thing that the demolition happened. All right, Yeah, well, the evidence debate is very simple. I'm not going to trouble you with all these technical things, but the main thing is that the existence of the temple was proven and that all the secularist historians had egg on their face. This includes